Right, well, good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Children and Young People Overview and Scrutiny Subcommittee. Today, Wednesday, the 5th of November. I trust we've checked the basement, have we? And I hope there are not too many fireworks at the meeting either. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to the meeting. I shall read out the special instructions. Please ensure mobile phones are switched on to silent to avoid any disruption to the meeting, or leave it in the car as I have. And fire procedure. If the fire alarm should sound, you'll be directed where to go. Please follow the instructions given by the officers. I'd also like to welcome our wonderful senior committee manager, Alison, who is going to keep me in order throughout the meeting. We have a number of officers at the bottom end of the room who shall ask to introduce themselves as we go through the meeting. And I'd also like to welcome all those thousands of people on YouTube who are observing the proceedings with great interest and bated breath. I'd also like to welcome our co-opted members, particularly our new co-opted member, Mary Palmer, who is here from the Diocese of York. Also welcome Chris Bullough, who is our co-optee sitting there really. And we've got Damien up there in the ether somewhere as well. Right, I think that's about it, Alison. So I'll crack on with the meeting itself. Item 1 is...
Sorry to interrupt. Could I just also introduce one of our young people who's come to shadow today? If you just want to grab a seat for a second, you'll get yourself on camera there. This is Ollie. I'll turn this one off. Let's have a look. There we are. This is Ollie, and he's going to be shadowing me this morning. So just wanted to welcome him to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kristen White. And welcome to Ollie. Right, move on to item 1, which is declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Members to declare any interest in items on the agenda and the nature of such interest. Councillor Sutton.
Good morning, Chair. Can I declare that I'm a governor at the hub? Thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Morning, Chair, ladies and gentlemen. I'm part of a social work team that works in child adolescent mental health services.
Splendid, thank you. And also I declare an interest as being the chair of 2 maintained nursery schools within the East Riding. Councillor Shepherd.
I declare I'm a teacher at Pocklington School.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Anybody else to make declarations? Nope. Right, we'll move on to minutes to approve as a correct record of the minutes of the meeting held not that very long ago on the 15th of October. Are you all happy with them? Right, we'll take them by acclamation then. And we move on to our first item on the agenda, which is education effectiveness, including SEND attainment at Key Stage 4. We have with us our Executive Director, who's Merlin Joseph. We have our Director of Education, Schools and Inclusion, Tom. We have Emma Hobbs, Head of School Effectiveness, Lisa Devine, Governor's Team Manager, and Ellie Walkington, who's just waved at me very nicely. Hello. Post 16 Development Officer. So do you want to kick off?
I'll start by a way of a very brief introduction, if that's okay, Chair. So we've had many conversations, I think, in this room over the past few years about the role of these teams and the changing focus of these teams. I'm just checking. I've got feedback. I don't know if anybody else. No, it's just me, just my voice. So the changing role of this team over some time. So what we have over the past few years under Emma's leadership is developed this team considerably and brought together functions in one space about educational effectiveness, as opposed to traditionally when we talked about school improvement. And that isn't to say that we still don't do that school improvement work, because we absolutely do. However, given that we have 91–92% of schools that are good or outstanding schools, they still need to be ensured that those schools are effective. We don't wait for a school not to be good in order to intervene and improve it, quote unquote. So really, this report is to give members an overview of the work of this team, I suppose, thematically and holistically across the whole scope of education. What I would say is Emma and Ellie and Lisa will go into the details of some of the work the team does, but I think it's absolutely impossible to completely capture the effect of this team and those workers across the whole system. So if we have an issue in SEND, we do not deal with that purely within SEND. We use this team as a conduit and a knowledge base throughout the whole system. If we have an issue in attendance, we do the same. If we have discussions with Mari and the diocese around church schools, we will be doing that through this team. If there are any other duties commensurate with the grade of the job, I think is the HR line, it tends to land within this team, and so incredibly well. So really, that was how I just wanted to introduce and to say that, you know, it's vital that we continue to work in that holistic way across the whole organisation. And I think, you know, we have, I'm not put people on the spot, but we have school leaders who will absolutely attest to that relationship and the centrality of an improvement partner approach. The other thing I would say is that there are things this team does that it does for all 149 schools and for the whole system, but there are equally things that this team does and more settings beyond the 149. But there are things this team does as well for 102 maintained schools for whom the council is the responsible body. And I think in the last 10 years of talking about academisation, we forget that actually there are a considerable number of maintained schools and duties that we have there. So I'm going to hand over to Emma and then her team members in order to give you some more flesh on the bones of this. And as ever, we've got a PowerPoint to run through before answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I feel my work here is done. It's all been explained for me. Fabulous. Thank you. Yes, it's an opportunity today to really to talk through some of that breadth and depth of the work that goes on across the education effectiveness team. And I feel like I'm sort of constantly saying at the moment, the team formerly known as ILS, and you'll many of you will be familiar with that term, school improvement team or improvement and learning service. And as Tom has mentioned in there, that shift away from thinking purely in terms of improvement, as this is about effectiveness across the whole system, in order to be most effective for our children and young people in East Riding. Okay, so hopefully that's going to go through. Unfortunately, Rachel from our early years team couldn't be with us today, but I know that you've heard from her recently. So I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail about the early years function. It's there in your report, but we do across our team sort of spread the range from 0 to 25 really in terms of our support around education effectiveness and what that means at all stages. Rachel is our early year strategic manager and leads that team who are really focused on the education element of early years, with that focus being on ensuring that, we've all heard the term a lot recently around school readiness, that settings and providers who are working with children before they enter a school setting that are prepared with that good level of development. So, you know, we know from the work that they do already supporting our settings, and that's PVIs as well as our maintained settings, nurseries, that when we think about nurseries, many of us will think about children going along in the year before school. Some of those are settings that have babies in them, and supporting that range of provision and delivery in there, so that children are able, by the point of entry into primary school, to be achieving that good level of development. We've also probably heard recently, and I know we've certainly talked about it, about the DfE's national target of GLD, which is that good level of development, which is a measure of a range of the skills and development in children that have been 75% by 2028. Now, we've had above national in many areas around our good level of development at times, and it's compared favourably with that, but that is still an ambitious target for us. So our team are very focused on working towards that. And they do that through that comprehensive training and support and walking alongside our providers in that understanding of what good early years provision is. Their training covers everything from safeguarding to finance. Because in order to deliver really good provision within a setting, providers need all of that support around that of what the day-to-day work looks like, what putting a provider's agreement in place looks like, how does staffing that work, and what does continuous workforce development look like for them. So they're that hub of knowledge around that. They also support around Ofsteds. As you know, earlier settings all have regular visits from Ofsted for quality assurance. And so they're there to support not only in the preparation from that, but following that in terms of the actions and delivery to ensure that our providers are of the quality that we expect for our children in East Riding. Wraparound is a word that we've been talking again a lot about recently, and that's that government expectation around the delivery of care beyond the usual hours in order to ensure that we can support our families with returning to work and being able to work as well. Now, for some, that's been a long established practice. For others, that's a new practice that's been developed by settings. So our team are right there with them. They're ensuring that what's in place they're able to deliver, and also that it's of high quality. So that can be really practical things that they're providing them with around training, and it may also be support around the strategic and operational elements of that. I'm going to talk about cross-directorate work in everything we do. As Tom has already kind of alluded to there is not one area of our team that works in a silo or in isolation. We are, if you like, for our external partners, we're the conduit to other areas of the council. We are that sort of broker of relationships in there. But also other teams know that if there's something they need to develop around SEND, around safeguarding, be around finance, then they work through the advisors and development officers within these teams, because they are the people on the ground who have relationships with the settings. So that's what it looks like for us before children and young people encounter school through our early years team. This is where I get this wrong now. Moving on, I'm going to talk about our education effectiveness team, the team formerly known as Improvement and Learning Service. And we're in that period of transition. You'll still hear it referred to ILS by people, or school improvement officers. I think we'll probably be a year before that settles and sits, really. And for me, that's the bit that's not important. It's about the work that we do as a team. Why I really wanted to bring this to you and explore what this means, this team, and what they deliver, is because I think there can be different understandings of what we do dependent upon where you engage with that service and where you experience them. So for many, they are seen as, well, it's a school improvement partner who goes and talks to the head teacher and supports them with knowing what to do, or when to do something, or how to do something, and is that challenge and support. It is that, but we are, as a team, so much more than that as well. So we have a traded service that brings in income to the team, where our maintained schools have an SLA with us for a certain amount of hours, and those can be packaged, bespoke to the school to deliver outreach, challenge, support that is bespoke to that school's needs. But we do go beyond that enormously in our breadth of support. We are involved in head teacher recruitment, and as we have 102 maintained schools, and the recruitment of the head teachers into those schools as local authority employees, it's really important that we have quality assurance over that and guide what is a decision made by governors, by volunteers in there, and guide that recruitment into that. So they're heavily involved in head teacher recruitment. And if any of you are governors and have ever gone through a head teacher recruitment, you'll know that as a governor, it is one of the biggest things you will ever do as a governor. And it's a big amount of responsibility. They're involved in curriculum development. So their level of knowledge about what makes a good curriculum and what the delivery of that looks like for different models of schools, for large schools, for schools that are mixed age, they maybe have two classes of mixed age groups, that they need to know or be able to look to their wider partnership to be able to really talk about what is high quality on that. Our advisors are all experts in their field, and that I'm proud to say they are ex-head teachers. They've walked in the shoes of the people that they are working with, and so with that bring credibility and professional respect, and very much can work with each other around that experience. We also have members of the team within there who are involved in SACRE, and some of you in here will no doubt sit on SACRE and will know that they play quite a vital role in supporting community cohesion across schools, but also work very closely across other departments and right across the council to ensure that we're actively involved in risk management. Now, those kind of might sound a bit abstract. What does that mean? That means that when a head teacher faces a crisis in a school, then it is likely that as well as their critical emergency planning, which they'll follow, one of the first phone calls they make is to their school improvement partner, their effectiveness partner, who, when we talk about working with, really does walk alongside them in those situations. So is the person who can say, right, okay, we've experienced this before. This is the first time for you, but it's not for us. We can work with the press office, or we can work with the Ed Sykes team. We have very rarely, but occasionally, really tragic events will happen in the life of a school, and having an outside voice of somebody who's able to support a school through those moments is really critical. So it's a very broad role they play over that. They're also involved in a huge amount of training for schools, of bringing national and international expertise and research to the fore for our school leaders, and so that they can then disseminate that into schools as well. When you're an active head in school, having the time to sift through all of that information and know what is quality assured and what is evidence-based can be tricky. So, it is always our intention to bring that to schools through the training that we offer, training that is part of a traded package that schools buy into, but also training that we ensure that because we have a geographical spread of schools, that we can tailor it to meet the needs of our geography. We do cluster training, we do online training, and some training that is just for small schools. We're able to run projects with external bodies, partners from a wider pool. So we're currently working with the Education Endowment Foundation on a research-based project around smaller schools, which we've been able to facilitate and bring to our smaller schools, which they might not be able to on their own. Okay. So what does all that mean for us? Now, I'm very privileged to have been part of the team and then stepped into this role to lead the team. But I do remember as a head teacher a time when this facility and team didn't exist. That's it. 2013 seems a long time ago now. It's around the time that I came into the authority. Not far off. And at that time, less than half of our schools were good in the East Riding. I'm really proud to say that we regularly sit above national. We sit at 90% upwards, and that's our maintained schools, along with our academies, but our maintained schools themselves on their own sit at that good, higher than 90%. of good and outstanding schools. And I know we're going to be talking over coming months around what good and outstanding in terms of the new Ofsted requirement mean. But we don't rest on our laurels with that. We know that that is only a picture in time. And so having that close relationship with schools where we risk manage and monitor and regularly review where schools are at in their cycle for Ofsted, or in their curriculum development, in changes that can happen in schools, can take quite a while to turn a school around that's had a difficult or challenging time. But it can happen very quickly to a school, that there can be decline if there's change in staffing circumstances. So we are there to monitor and guard against that, and to act quickly and highlight that to all of our partners, and really bring that team around the school together should that happen. So in terms of outcomes, I'm going to talk to you more at the annual education report about the SEND outcomes in detail, about outcomes overall. But we do, we're regularly in line with national figures. We've seen dips since COVID, and we're very focused on what those dips mean, and how we are now tailoring our support around the development of particular packages to support the, I don't want to say catch up, but that work that is really about addressing the needs of our children and young people who have been affected by that time during COVID, and the rising increase of need for social emotional health, communication and language since then. So we'll certainly be talking about that more in the annual education report. Again, I'm going to point to cross-directorate work. We have a huge amount of cross-directorate work going on, and that's growing all of the time to support those priorities that we have as a directorate and as a council, to support particularly our most vulnerable children and young people. So my officers, who maybe 5 years ago would have worked in a purely school-to-school basis, now work very routinely with officers from SEND, from social care, on individual items and challenges, but also on wider packages of support, delivering on our Nurturing Schools programme with SEND, and developing inclusive schools as an example. So a huge amount of work going on there. I can't cover it all in here, and you may have questions on that, but I'm going to move on, because I did promise I wouldn't take too long, sorry, to what happens in the post-16 world for our children and young people, and I'm going to pass you over to Ellie.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Emma. So good morning, everybody. I'm Ellie Walkington. I'm here today on behalf of Sarah Fletcher, who manages what is becoming the Post-16 Preparation, Participation and Effectiveness Service. So the new team is made up of 4 previously separate functions, and we now provide that overarching strategic leadership of post-16 education, employment and training. We ensure that young people and children and young people are prepared for post-16 transition through high quality, impartial information, advice and guidance. We've really carefully considered our information services, such as the Log On Move On website that you may be aware of, to make sure that they are suitable for all groups. So rather than that offer being potentially inconsistent across the directorate or across different cohorts of young people, we now have very carefully made sure that that hopefully is suitable for all young people in our area. We ensure that young people are participating in education, employment and training, as the council has a legal duty to assist and enable participation. So we know where our young people are enrolled, and importantly, we know whether they continue attending that provision, that education and training provision as well. So we are especially proud as well that we have really low levels of what we call situation unknowns, which I will come on to in a moment as well. So we ensure that we have sufficient provision, and that there are education and training pathways into local employment specifically, and establishing where the gaps are and working with local providers to resolve those gaps. We have a local area partnership approach to participation and preparation for work and life, which kind of brings us back to the first point, because this really helps us in our management of that post-16 education and training landscape. Okay. So we are starting to see the strengthening of prevention and early identification processes due to our implementation of its risk of NEAT and risk of dropping out indicators that are on the screen there. So RONI and RODI, RONI and RODI. Even in this kind of short period that we've been working together as a team, we've seen a reduction in the number of young people who are situation unknown at this stage in the academic year. So to give some context to that, in October 2023, our NEETs and not known figures were 8%. In October 2024, that was 7.5%, and our forecasted figures, so projected for October 2025, are actually 5.1%. So this means that we can work with confirmed NEETs much sooner in the academic year, because that kind time-consuming investigative work has been largely completed earlier than in previous years. So we know who is actually NEET. We've had fewer unknowns. So in terms of the direct impact that that has on our young people, it means that our team can get to work with them as soon as possible. So we can hopefully get them onto those courses that may have started in September that they potentially could have missed out on in other situations. Or those young people can be among the first to access the new November Start NEET re-engagement programmes that we've been instrumental in arranging in the communities. So that recognises that the longer somebody is out of provision, the more re-engagement work would likely be required to get them back into education or training. And it's also worth mentioning as well that being NEET has a significant negative impact, or what we call a scarring effect, on future earning potential and long-term career prospects. So the longer a young person is NEET, the more severe and lasting these financial consequences tend to be. And of course, we're all aware as well of the health and well-being benefits that come with being in education, employment or training. So as part of our work, we have aligned the council-led Universal Careers Information Services. So that's our primary careers work, and the Log On Move On Careers front door. We've aligned those with specialist careers education, information, advice and guidance. So that's known as CEIAG. And that offer for us is level 6 qualified impartial careers advisors, and they specialise in SEND and preparing for adulthood for our young people. And that means that we have an all age approach to planning next steps and preparation for work and life. And so all of our young people, inclusive of need and regardless of setting, receive that. We've got a focus on effective, timely data sharing, so that ensures consistency across all of our vulnerable groups, and we adapt our universal services to those who are most at risk of becoming NEET. And we're further strengthening our partnership approaches internally and externally to remove barriers to participation and to improve outcomes. So internally, that means we're working with adult services on supported internships. We're working with electively home educated young people in the Education Welfare Service. We're working with those who are educated other than in school, so EOTIS and EOTIC. We're working with the SENDART teams, economic development for youth re-engagement, so like the Ready to Work programme. We work with the virtual schools and the pathway teams. And externally, that's working with schools and settings. It's working with post-16 providers, employers, with the LSIP, the Local Skills Improvement Plan, the Mayoral Combined Authority, the Children and Family Strategic Partnership. So a really wide range of stakeholders. And of course, we share our professional knowledge across children's services as well, so that all staff who are working with children and young people understand the role that they play in supporting that preparation for next steps as well. And we are using what we call our universal assets within the team to support improvements in specialist services as well. So for example, we're using the Log On Move On platform to support alternative providers. So we're providing like an online directory of alternative providers that schools and professionals can use. And then we also have the consult tool as well, which we use to support SENDAR in the consultation process for learners with EHCPs. And finally, I'd also like to invite you all to attend the Hull and East Riding Apprenticeship Expo. I couldn't not have a little plug in there for that. It's taking place 2 weeks today at Bishop Burton College, and it's a perfect example of the partnership work that I've just described. So we're expecting to have about 1,500 people come across the event. It's on 10 until 6 p.m. And if you need any details about that, please do ask us. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions or would like any further information about the new post-16 team and the support that we can offer, please do get in touch. And I will hand back to Emma. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. We're never knowingly undersold. I just like to say we'll always get a plug in. So what underpins all of this and makes sure that this all works within legal and statutory duties? That's the governance effectiveness team, which is led by Lisa Devine. And Lisa's going to take any of your questions that you have around governance. Governance is a statutory function, and it is really important that we're able to support settings with delivering that within all of the legal requirements, and that's within all settings. So we might think about school governors, but as you'll know, we have experience here of nursery governors, governors of special and independent schools, and I'm going to get a plug in as well. If you're not a governor, Lisa is the person to contact. It's a very rewarding role. But our governors play a really critical role in ensuring that that legal and regulatory guidance is fulfilled within schools. In order to do that, they need the support of specialist clerks, clerks who are really informed and kept up to date with legal changes within that, and have the training and the knowledge to be able to ensure that they're giving the correct advice and ensuring that governing bodies are staying within the remit of their roles and responsibilities. So there's procedural advice that's given during meetings, but also at the end of a phone call, so that governing boards never need to feel that they are working in isolation. Lisa's team does the information management around the records, which again, there are statutory duties around, and ensure that there is effective administration so that that system can work really smoothly, effectively and well. They are a traded service there, and I want to make sure that I really make that clear, in that in order to be able to do what they do, they also go out and trade outside of county. They work with local authority schools, maintain schools and academies, and have made sure that they are skilled and qualified to be able to do that. And so it's become a sustaining role in that the income they bring in is also able to support that ongoing training to ensure that they are continually up to date and in the best position to give the best quality advice. They support with suspensions and exclusions as well, and grievances and complaints. So there's a lot of legal duties within that. I'll go really quickly on the last bit. Our wider services, just to touch upon, educational visits. They may seem like a sort of a nice add-on, but they're a really important part of school life and carry a huge amount of risk with them, potentially. So we have an officer who works around educational visits and outdoor learning and manages all of the risk assessment around those, supports schools and trains schools on ensuring that those are carried out legally compliantly, but also safely and without reducing the high quality educational opportunities for children and young people. Good stop.
Just draw you to a close there, Emma.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I do have a number of people
The
asking
rest is
questions.
in the report. I'll hand over to any questions you have. You can tell that we're really keen to share the work that we do, and thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, I do recognise it's a massive subject and it's a lot to take in one half-hour briefing. Councillor Johnson.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the report. Thank you for your presentation. You are clearly hugely enthusiastic about what you do, and I think it's fair to say that this committee is also really enthusiastic about what you do. I have heaps of questions, but clearly you're very much a glue, that a kind of a hub that is involved with so many different aspects of school life, right from early years right up to post-16 education, presumably. And you've mentioned colleges, you've mentioned working out of county. It's quite incredible. But I believe you're not actually a statutory requirement. You're something that has been developed by, and you mentioned since 2013 you were put together, and obviously your effectiveness is demonstrated by how well our schools have come along in that time. So my question is really with regard to funding. How are you funded? You have mentioned areas where you do attract funding, but I mean, we would definitely not want to lose you going forward just because funding is so tight. So that's my key question. Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in at the very any talk of funding. I always just want to make, I suppose, really clear, Councillor Johnson, and then hand over to Emma. Thank you for those comments. Absolutely, whilst the service itself doesn't have a statutory footing as directly as some of our other statutory responsibilities, does oversee those roles that we have in a wider statutory function about oversight of the education system. So I suppose it's less codified, isn't it, than unstatutory in that sense. You know, clearly as a responsible body for 102 maintained schools, we have a responsibility to ensure that governance, as one example, is there. We have statutory responsibilities in the post-16 space, which will only grow in terms of the development. You know, some of that will be shared with the combined authority, but we're only going to need more interventions in some of that. So yes, it's more challenging in some ways in terms of funding because there is not a clear statutory basis the same way there is, for example, around admissions, which is very clear in the law of something that we have to do. But as you've said, that you know the glue element is a very apt metaphor. In terms of how the service is funded, maybe Emma wants to just run through that bit.
Thank you. So we're a bit of a blend of funding, really, through the SLAs and the income that we generate as traded services, and we are very commercially minded around that. And you know, and a lot of our work has been really focused on developing and honing that over the last couple of years to be as sharply edged as we can, as competitive as we can, to support our sustainability, if you like, and our ability to be able to develop that. We do so rely on certain central funding from that as well to be able to deliver those services. And I think what's really key to note in this, though, is that there is not a direct sort of link or benchmark against another authority that you can look at because we have 102 maintained schools. So schools that have, you know, predominantly academised, that may not have the function that we have because they don't have the responsibility they have for that number of schools to be able to support. Our schools, we have, you know, we still have a lot of maintained schools that are doing really well. And are doing really well for their communities as well. So, you know, it's really incumbent upon us to be able to support them to deliver that function and to ensure that they are, you know, in our role as the authority, to be able to ensure that they can provide high quality and that we know it is as well, and that we're supporting them to do so. So yes, it is a challenge. And you know, all funding always welcomed in order to be able to deliver and continue to deliver what has been for many years, you know, a very successful arm of the Education Directorate.
Thank you. Millen.
Just wanted to add the wider impact it has in terms of having good schools in your local area. So in the presentation, Emma referred to, you know, they've moved from 50% to over 90% good or outstanding schools. Now, if it was that we had inadequate schools, then what you're likely to see is families not moving into the East Riding because they would want their children to go to really good schools for the future ambitions that they may have. So there are wider impacts that it has. I guess the other thing as well, in terms of the world of education, has changed significantly in terms of complexity of need in those schools. And the revision that we've done to the design of the school improvement partners in moving them to more around effectiveness is around how we support those schools to manage those complexities around special educational needs and disabilities. What we know is that in the East Riding, we have far less special schools, but we have just shy of 4,000, isn't it, on education, health and care plans. So Ofsted, when they come in, they will scrutinise you on your arrangements for special educational needs and disabilities. and our school improvement partners / effectiveness advisors are working with our head teachers and school staff to support that. And it's really pleasing to see when we see an inspection report, we go down in the report and we see that SEND is well supported. And one of the things that we've been doing is where we see that there are surplus or head teachers have identified actually in a school, what we could do is utilise some capital to look at how we can make that school more inclusive, which then brings some additional funding into that school so that they are much more financially stable. So it's much, much broader than just having these officers working. They have had to evolve as things have changed in society. And I'm really proud of the service in the fact that they've reached that target. Of course, we would love to be 100% good or outstanding. But we do have Multi Academies Trust that also impacts on the outcomes as well. And we've got some really good maths in the area. In East Riding, we do have a lot of maintained schools. And the direction from the previous government was to academise. That is not such on the agenda anymore. What we're hearing from the new administration is more about inclusivity. And what our children tell us, we want to go to the same school as our next door neighbour, have friendships rather than going out of county. And that is what these officers are actually actively looking at. How can we enhance, how can we support schools so that they can become more inclusive and we can have more children with SEND and disabilities attending local schools for our local children.
Thank you, Bernard. We've got 6 more questions to come. So could I ask you to keep your questions short, and can I ask that the answers are sort of not quite as lengthy as well? We next have Councillor Holtby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick one, probably for Emma. I'm not quite sure whether I sort of picked up on it, but how do you work with the academies? So, I mean, slightly to Merlin's point, people might want to move into the East Riding because all the schools are good, but if the academies are not performing as well as the maintained schools, etc., do you have input into them? And if you do the academies pay for that input?
Thank you. We have really good relationships with our academies, and that's where it starts. And actually, that's what underpins all of our work, is our really good relationships with our schools, no matter what it says above the door. So we have an element that are traded services with them, and that so they can buy in to packages. Now, those may be around school improvement, school effectiveness. They may be around governance, and Lisa manages several contracts with our academies where we're able to build that relationship and advise through influence in some ways. That while we may not have some of the same, we don't have the same structures around, not that we, sort of instructing with our maintained schools, but it is, around influence and relationship. We also have, through the work we do, several sort of structures of networks where we bring them together. Next week is a really good example. We'll be meeting with all school leaders, and academies are just as involved within that. So our messaging goes out through those, and we can work with them on conversations that we're having with them about issues that may have come up from their Ofsted reports, that may be coming up through information that we hold or that they're sharing with us. And we've created over the last few years and continue to create networks where that kind of information can come to the fore and it can be shared more openly. We have across the directorate, there is a regular meeting that takes place with the CEOs of academies that is really developing that relationship as well. So where they're coming together and we are an element that can support that function. Following schools inspections, whether they're academies or maintained schools, we scrutinise. Obviously, we may know more coming up to the inspection because of our knowledge of being on the ground in a school more. That's not to say we might not be on the ground in a school, because Ellie certainly goes into academies, and we have differing work, different levels. But there is a very direct conversation that would take place with the school, be it academy or maintained, if there were areas of concern there as well, where we would expect to be involved in what that work looks like going forward. So, you know, I'm really, really pleased with the positive relationship we have with our academies. And, you know, they're all different relationships. But we've invested and continue to invest a lot of time and resource into building that.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you so much for your report, very much appreciated, and all the detail that's in there as well. And you know, our overall stats are really, really positive, which is always encouraging. I'm going to try and keep it short. I'm coming from two sides really, in terms of the initial kind of recommendations for our consideration were very much about education effectiveness, very obviously, reducing risk to council reputation, and our preparedness for inspection. I suppose one angle of my question is to ensure that we recognise the individuality that exists within, you know, the 102 schools that are out there. So we, you know, we've all been there, and we've all experienced the changes in the Ofsted framework over the years, and understand that sometimes that framework isn't necessarily what we consider as individuals to be effective or good in schools. So ensuring that we recognise that individuality and that creativeness, that difference in schools, and don't become too much of a top-down approach is my first question. Then they're going to come to the other way, which is kind of the scrutiny side of things. Is, you know, and I know we're introducing a new kind of branding of the approach, but I suppose from a scrutiny point of view, we've got to know how are the comms being maintained in early years, and how can we scrutinise that. The NEAT data was really, really good, and you know that dropped from 8% to 7.5. But what about where our students are going? You know, are they exiting university? And so understanding that. So and for me, it's that scrutiny of where we are now. I know on our work programme we have individual approaches to this, but I suppose what we need to do is this change of approach to an education effectiveness service. We'll need those key performance indicators in there: early years, post 16, how are governors working, are there any issues, so we can maintain what you've already made good. And that data is telling, you know, the movement to good is brilliant, but we've got to scrutinise that. So the individuality, whilst at the same time, how are we going to scrutinise the change?
Yeah, sure. Just you might want to follow up, but just to address the two, that around that support around our good schools, yeah, we definitely take the sort of a broader view of what effective is. If we think about the old judgments of an RI school, you know, we know that RI is a really big umbrella, and a school can be just RI or just still RI, but almost good. And that journey of effectiveness, we forensically you know, kind of analyze and look at. And so we monitor the progress and development of schools against a very clear journey of how they're developing in their outcomes for pupils, beyond also what is just reported. I mean, obviously, you know, we're working with data sets to one degree. That's one of our measures and metrics that we have to be, you know, our accountability is around there. But we also look at the whole picture in the same way that we work with schools to look at the whole child, and not just, you know, their outcomes in reading, writing and maths. So what does that broader curriculum look like? What does the broader offer look like? One of the key things we might work on with the school is, what does its engagement with families and the community look like? How is it developing its workforce? What's its sustainability and succession planning looking like? So there's a lot of breadth around that. That comes in through our risk register, and we do an annual risk review across all services with education, where we bring all partners together on that. But we also have a monthly risk assessment where our advisors take all of the knowledge they know about schools and bring that to the table around that. In terms of the metrics, we will bring that in the annual education report, which I think is coming in a couple of weeks. You're going to get all that level of detail in there as well. And you know, we can address through that how we're approaching where we may see, you know, changes in some things as well. So that you will get that, I can assure you.
Just follow up very briefly on data. Absolutely, I'd welcome that approach where I suppose as Merlin and I have set out quite a lot of these topics about how we're now working, that actually when we look at the work programme, the next time we focus and we drill down to some of that data. So for example, it's the analysis behind using neat data as an example that Ellie was talking about there that actually shows why we're different. Because if you look at our numbers of needs, we can look broadly similar to other local authorities, or we can even look like we're higher. But because we know where all our children and young people are in a very low not known number of perhaps 1% versus 12% of children and young people that are not known, it's what the data tells you in the widest possible sense. And that's where I'd like to, I suppose, put more of that data in front of you and have that scrutiny and that challenge. The other thing I would say is that ties into what we do more corporately. And there is a lot of data out there about key risk indicators, key performance indicators, and Merlin and I and the teams are looking at how we review that to make sure that's fit for the present. Because talking about, for example, how many percentage of parents get their preferred school place is not an indicator of good or poor performance. It's a degree of our rurality. You know, what's more important is how many places are we removing? What are the outcomes, the outcome data, etc. But more than happy for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Can I just one?
Is it going to be quick, Councillor?
Really quick, promise. Absolutely. I knew that data was going to come later on, and really appreciate that. I suppose my key point is to recognise the individuality of schools. And I think that's for me really important, because, you know, people, a lot of work in communities are very different depending on where you are in the county. And I think that the moment that doesn't necessarily come through.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Henderson.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I've spoke to several people in schools. I know valuable to find your service, so congratulations. Councillor Shepherd had kind of stole my limelight in terms of the question I was going to ask, but I'm going to go there anyway. It'd be beneficial to have the time to come away and then coordinate our questions and come back, but time's the enemy. In my working environment, stronger together and working together is very important. Culturally, schools are very, very different in terms of who they're working with, the age groups, and how they work, the platforms they use. For example, I'm one of these people who likes to grab someone at the other side of the office and have a conversation in person and a snapshot and communicate on the telephone. Some schools work, and definitely East Rhine councils work on like Teams and platforms like that. So in terms of mechanics of it, how do you coordinate all the different communication? How do you all speak together and ensure, and I hate the term slip through the net, but how do we ensure that we've got that level of safety for everyone involved? And that's quite, and then a second question, a really easy one. I just wanted to understand what qualification, level 6 or 7 qualification was in career development, just to understand what level of where people are at in terms of the advice they're giving.
So all qualifications have level. A level 2 is GCSE level. A level 3 is A level. Level 4, you're looking at kind of foundation, and then level 5, level 6 are like degree level.
If I pick up in terms of communication, there are many elements of communication for exactly that reason, not least our geographical spread of our schools, the individuality of our schools, and the working patterns of people as well. And so, you know, it has been a case over many years of fine-tuning what our communication looks like, and it has to be a broad offer. So in terms of communications to our schools and settings and different providers, there's a variety really. And so it may seem that sometimes that we're repeating information, but it will go out through a printed form, through newsletters, weekly newsletters, if appropriate, the webinars, conferences where appropriate in person. But the key bit, and all of that, you know, so we're bringing together people in whole groups, in cluster groups, maybe in schools or settings of similar sizes. Our governor clerks play a vital role in a lot of the information as well that we then ensure is is reinforced in school, that it doesn't get lost in, you know, somebody's gone back from something and something else has happened. So, you know, gosh, that's gone out of my head. The governors, clerks ensure that key messages are then picked up on. Governor training is critical to ensuring that all of, you know, key messages, statutory duties, what's big on the education agenda, governors' newsletters, they come out through there. But underpinning all of that is, I think, kind of what underpins all really effective work, personal relationships. So we do an awful lot of ensuring that, you know, I would hope we match our officers well with partners, but also that they are really skilled in being able to work with a wide variety of different providers. We have specialists in secondary, specialists in early years, specialists in post-16, but also, you know, a lot of our team can also work across the spectrum of things. So I'm by nature a primary specialist, but I've worked with secondaries around leadership and management because there are cross-transferable skills within there. They all know the East Riding really well as well. Many have worked in the East Riding, so know our landscape and the various challenges that you know, you face that are different to whether you're a small isolated rural school to a coastal school to a town urban school setting. And certainly, you know, we do a lot of joint working as a team with a team around the school where all of that skill set can be brought together. So individuality can be really addressed in those ways as well. But our quest to ensure the perfect communication, because if 10 people in a room and 10 people take away a different message, never stops. We're reinforcing messages all the time, and ensuring that we listen as well as speak. Okay.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report. Mine is a brief question. And mine is for Ellie. Okay, so once you've tracked somebody down on the post-16 department, basically, so is somebody actually going out to meet this person face to face? And what are you doing, you know, like to get them to engage? And just very briefly, is there a percentage where you never get hold of them? Is there a cohort that you've never managed to reach at all? Thank you.
So we start off with many thousands. We start off with a full cohort, so a long list, and then basically we tick people off that list as we know where they've gone. So we work with colleges and sixth forms and get their enrolment data, and that takes a good chunk off our list. And then our participation officers are very creative in the ways that they will try and get in touch with people, and it includes working with other professionals within the council. So if that person is known to any professional services, it's working with them. If it's a case of they might have used the log on move on system, so we might be able to get in touch with them that way. We work with the schools to see if there's any way of getting in touch with them that way. We go out and we door knock. We Google them and see if there's anything on there as well. They are very, very creative in terms of how they track down those young people. And then yes, when they get in touch with them and find that if they are neat, then they work with them to re-engage them. So it could be referring them to other council services. So they might refer them to the Ready to Work programme to re-engage them and to help them into education. Our participation officers are really well briefed in terms of the education and training provision that is available across the region. So they might be able to pick out something that they know that young person will engage with and help them with that. And they often go as far as to, you know, literally helping that young person get there and ensuring that they do engage with that they sign up, that they enroll, and that they attend on their first day. And then they check in with them afterwards to check that they're attending. They might refer them to our what they previously called our Send IAG office, so our qualified careers advisors, who will potentially then open a case and work with them to get them re-engaged as well. So there's lots of different ways that we will do that.
So the little side question was that, is there a tiny percentage that you never get hold of?
Sorry, I missed that bit. I believe there is. I can double check on that because I'm not entirely sure, but I believe so. Yeah, a very small amount potentially.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Thank you, Ellie. And our last question on this sector, which has been waiting for an absolute age, is Councillor Cantrell.
Thank you. This is for Emma. This goes back to the very beginning. I sit on SACRE and I have been an RE teacher, and I know that despite legal requirement, RE is not taught in schools. And I think I get a bit frustrated because I've actually asked a few times, what if a school is not teaching RE? And the response I've had, we send a strongly worded letter. And again, and then I ask again, but what happens after that? We send another strongly worded letter. And and in the current climate we're living, I really think it's important that RE is taken seriously and taught in schools. And I'd like to know if there's something that we can do. Rather than just, I attend those meetings and I do come away quite disappointed that it seems to be just having a meeting for a meeting. And another response is some of head teachers don't know that they have to teach it. But of course they do. Head teachers do know that it needs to be taught. So.
No, I think you make a really good point there. As I mentioned, we have an officer who is our representative on SACRE, who I will say is relentless in her work with schools to ensure that it is, and has really developed that work over the last couple of years of getting, if you like, getting into schools and academy trusts as well, to support them with what that will look like, to ensure it is. I think it's probably worth mentioning there's been mention today of it being part of the curriculum review and potentially being statutory, which I think would be really welcomed for all the points that you make. We certainly talk about it as a team, and also work with teams across the council to ensure that they understand what that means. And what good RE teaching brings to the community in terms of inclusivity and community cohesion, and how important that is. And as we develop that understanding, you know, it's our intention that that level of seriousness and priority is raised. We do challenge schools on it, and when we're doing a curriculum review with them, we're very clear how that will be seen in their accountability agenda as well. So it is taken very seriously by us, and we continue to push schools and urge schools and support them as well to be able to deliver that. But certainly today's news about it being hopefully part of a statutory part of the curriculum review would be really welcomed.
Thank you very much, Emma, and thank you for the question, Councillor Cantrell. I think that's a very important question. Very well said. Thank you. Ellie.
Hello, sorry, I've just got a follow-up. I checked with my colleagues to find out exactly how many we are situation unknown, completely situation unknown. So at present we have nine young people that we don't know. So one in year 12 who unfortunately the mum doesn't know where he is even, and 8 in year 13, and 2 of those are refused to give information. So out of a cohort of over 10,000, that is a very small number.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kristen White.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick wiggle on Councillor Cantrell's point. Just wanted to say that I'm sure you're doing everything you can to make sure that schools are delivering religious education. But I always notice Ofsted never mention it in their reports, and actually it should be them that are checking properly when they do their inspections that schools are delivering it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the observation. And thank you for our panoply of experts at the other end of the room. I hate having to rush things, and there's a lot of really, really good work which we're doing there. And I think it's certainly well recognised, understood and appreciated by the subcommittee. We do have a couple of recommendations. I've taken the liberty of modifying recommendation 8, so it should now read, with your approval, of course, that the subcommittee note and commend the recent work of the Education Effectiveness Service to support improved outcomes for children and young people, and recognise this at budget setting. Councillor Johnson.
Could we recognise the fact that this is a unique service, that nobody else has this service, and somewhere in that first recommendation, because we desperately needed to continue because your effectiveness is, well,
Absolutely.
that's why our kids do so well.
Absolutely. Councillor Johnson and Alison has already got that in hand. And we do have a secondary recommendation, is that the subcommittee note that the service plays a critical role in actively working to reduce risks to the council reputation and maximising its influence on education. And as I said before, it's a vital service. I never cease to be amazed by the width and the breadth of what you cover. And it must be immensely challenging. And it's thanks to your dedication, commitment and hard work that it's such a successful service as it is now. So thank you for attending. I'm afraid we'll now have to move on to the next item. Thank you. And can I just remind you all, this is not a coffee break. Right, if I can ask you all to take your seats, please. Right, we're moving on to item 2. But before we do go on to the next item, Councillor Shepherd would like to make a further recommendation to the education effectiveness item.
Apologies, Chair, that I should have wiggled or waved, and we were discussing it at the time. So it's just to continue to ensure we recognise and support the individuality of all our schools, whilst at the same time using inspection and reputational metrics to measure the performance of the new service. And I think it's just that element of, otherwise we're nodding rather than scrutinising, and I think that's really, really important. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. That's okay, Alison? That's absolutely splendid. Right, we'll move on to...
Sorry, excuse me, Chair. Can we add that we recognise the cultural differences in each school and the barriers that they face? Can we add that in? Sorry, I know I'm being...
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Right, now can we move on? Determination of admission arrangements and coordinated schemes. And we have with us, again, we have our esteemed director. We have Merlin, our executive director, Joanne Fenton, school place planning and organisation manager, which is just a little bit of a mouthful, and Leslie Sellers, head of place sufficiency and development. So the floor is yours, ladies.
Morning, Chair, morning, members. So we're really pleased today. We've got a short presentation just to share the key highlights in the report that we've submitted to scrutiny. So today we're looking at the admission arrangements and coordinated schemes for 2027-28. And I'll hand over to Joe to go through some slides and then we'll take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. So East Riding of Yorkshire Council is the admission authority for all community schools and voluntary control schools in the East Riding, and we are therefore responsible for setting the admission arrangements for these schools. Admission authorities must ensure that the practices and criteria used to decide the allocation of school places are fair, clear and objective. Our timescales for determination, we're actually bringing this report to you during our consultation period. So our admission arrangements are currently out for public consultation. The consultation started on the 8th of October and will end on the 26th of November. We are on the forward plan of key decisions and we'll be presenting our report to Cabinet and asking them to determine the admission arrangements on the 27th of January. The statutory deadline for determination is actually the 28th of February. Any changes of published admission number which Cabinet approve will not be implemented until the 1st of September 2027. We're proposing changes to the published admission numbers of 15 maintained and community schools. If approved, these changes will remove 1,681 places from schools from September 2027. Previously, between 2022 and 2026, we have removed a total of 1,634 school places. Just to say, I know we're not in 2026 yet, but we have to determine the admission numbers 18 months ahead, our admission arrangements. Thanks, Leslie. And this slide 4 shows the declining demographic and the reason for our need to reduce our published admission numbers. So you can see at the moment the population of children and young people who are aged between reception and year 11 were just under 43,000. But if the population stabilises at the current level of 0 to 1 year olds, we're looking at that falling by about 12,000 to 31,000. Now, just to say that is assuming, so that the far right hand side of that graph could go up slightly if the birth rate increases, or equally it could go down. Thanks, Leslie. Sorry, can we just go back, because I've realised I've missed a big chunk. Yeah, I've missed the important information. Sorry, can we go back another one? Thank you. So we are proposing changes to the PANs of 15 maintained and community schools. I'm not going to list them all, but if I just highlight some of them. Bridlington School is consulting on a change of PAN from 180 to 160. The school currently has a published admission number of 200, but we did consult last year, and so the PAN will reduce to 180 from September 2026. So despite that change, they are asking us to consult again for to remove further places. Similar story with Brough Primary School. They currently have a PAN of 60, but consulted last year to reduce the PAN to 45 from September 2026, and have asked us again to consider a change to the PAN to 30 from September 2027. Driffield Junior School have asked us to consult on a PAN change from 150 to 120, and that brings the PAN in line with the feeder infant schools, who both have a PAN of 60. Longcroft School and Sixth Form College have agreed to reduce their PAN quite significantly from 270 to 180. And finally, Parkside Primary School in Goole, who currently have a PAN of 60. We are consulting on reducing that to 45. The governing body had asked us to reduce the PAN to 30. However, when we've looked at our data, we felt that that was a step too far. So we have agreed to meet in the middle, and we are proposing a PAN reduction to 45. Since 2022 and 2026, as I said, we've removed a total of 1,634 school places from maintained and community schools. Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, we can move on. Thank you. So the DfE do advise us that the optimal level of school place surplus is 5% to allow for pupil movement and parental preference. Currently, we have a surplus of 10% of school places in the East Riding. We are projecting that this will increase to 17% by 2030. However, if these PAN changes are approved by Cabinet, our surplus will be predicted to be 15% by 2030. and that could reduce further if we introduce current admission numbers on year groups to further reduce any surplus, and also if any academy trusts consult on PAN changes. Thank you. That is the end of our presentation, so we would welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Shepherd.
Sorry, Martha, I was writing, honestly. Thank you so much for your presentation and the detailed numbers, really appreciate it. I suppose my question is, you highlighted the kind of 40% drop in, let's use Longcroft as an example, and relative to the drop in the actual numbers going into schools nationally, birth rate. My question is, will that impact on the educational assets that we have across the county? Because obviously, if that continues and we continue the trend with the PAN, looking at the birth rate, that is going to have an impact. I know we have plans with repurposing classrooms, but that's a 40% drop, and that's not just a classroom, that's potentially half a school. So it's looking at that, how that's going to impact across there.
Thanks. I'll start with that, I suppose. What I would say is across the piece, we have a large amount of educational infrastructure, if you like, and we are dedicated to using that in increasingly different and creative ways. So school-based nurseries, which you'll have heard about, making sure we have nurture provisions in school, making sure the needs of more children with SEND can be in their local communities. All these will require spaces within schools. So if you think about core curriculum space, yes, that will have to shrink back. Yes, we have plans, particularly around Longcroft, because there's a very high degree of surplus. I think we've got about over 50% surplus places there. The drop in the PAN here in terms of that school is one that those places have been technically, you know, the PAN has been 270 for a number of years. I can't remember the last time we had more than 180 pupils on roll in a year group there. It's been some considerable time, and that is permanent demographic change. So yes, there are potentially implications of having an estate that is larger than the numbers of pupils on it. But for me, this is about making sure that first and foremost, we don't lose provisions in communities that exist. Secondly, that we make sure that we don't incur or create capital costs for ourselves in future by expanding again if the birth rate were to tick up. And by in the future, I mean when literally nobody around this table will be in these roles anymore. It could be 30, 40 years. Notwithstanding that people might want to still be in 30 years, but you know, I think it's unlikely. And really making sure that we can ameliorate that. And I would say that the work that this team do, which is absolutely fantastic, is predicated on the idea that this is an annual process and that we change, and therefore it's not too late to look again and to change again. And some of the examples that Joe's given are precisely about setting that. So whilst it looks like there's there is a degree of challenge here, it's being managed and a very close eye being kept on it.
Maya.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go.
Sorry, no, thank you. I just wanted to add to what Tom said, and I think because we've got the work around sufficiency right from early years school places, special educational needs places, and alternative provision, I think it ensures that we look at our assets across everything, and make sure that we're meeting needs in those local communities. I also think the work we've done with schools in the area review meetings that Joe and the team have held, and they've been face-to-face meetings with all schools in those individual place planning areas, are really helpful because they're looking at then the differences and the special uniqueness of those places, and everyone working together to meet the need. Thank you.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. I suppose my concern was that the demographic dip may change, as you highlighted, and what you don't want is with the budgetary constraints that are going to hit us over the next few years for assets to be used to solve other problems rather than the potential education problems. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Henderson.
I've caught me off guard as well. Thank you for your presentation. I think I might have asked this question before, but I want to ask it again because in my ward, there's lots of housing developments taking place. So people work in a more hybrid role. They work more remotely from the team base. As technology develops, people don't have to leave the home to travel to different areas. So I just wondered, people moving into the area, I mean, East Riding features often as a nice place to live in, magazines and it's got risen in its profile over the years. How are we tracking this in terms of people moving into the area, young people? I'm guessing birth rates are down. We're tracking that within our area. We're looking at schools and empty seats, but how are we projecting people moving to that? How is all that being tracked? Thank you.
We produce pupil projections every year, which includes historical data. Our birth data goes back as far as 2000, and just on the birth data, the last birth data we had was from 2023, and it showed 2,482 births in the East Riding, but our highest number on record was 2012. And we had 3,211 births, so we're 729 births down on where we were in 2012. We also, obviously, over the years, build up our data, so we have formulas which Tom very kindly in a previous role put into our projection spreadsheets, which calculate the in-year movement. So we do have that as well. We have got an issue at the moment in Beverley in year 4, 5 and 6, because over the summer we've had, I think, 74 children move in, which is unheard of. We've not had that before. And when we've done some research into why that was, we get the build out rates for developments, and it normally tends to work out about 35 houses per year per developer. And in Beverley, they actually built 253 houses when we were expecting them to build 70. And also there was some affordable housing within that and social housing. So we've had an awful lot of families moved in. So we're very grateful to the schools in Beverley who have gone over number in year 4, 5 and 6, notwithstanding there are a lot of surplus places in reception year 1, year 2 and year 3 across the board.
Just quick follow-up, sorry. So we've managed to place those extra. So do we, I mean, buffer's the wrong word, isn't it? But do we have like a buffer zone to allow that movement in case there is an influx in one year or another?
I think the difficult thing is that legally there is no limit to how many pupils schools can take. So legally, if a child moves into their catchment area and there is no other place available within a reasonable distance, under the Fair Access Protocol, they have to admit that child. So what we're trying to do, and we met with Beverley head teachers yesterday to discuss this with them, what we're trying to do is if children move into the Beverley area, we're trying to share the load across all of the schools, because predominantly they're moving into the Keldmarsh and Beverley St Nicholas catchment areas, and Keldmarsh is bursting at the seams. So we're trying to spread them across all of the schools, and we really appreciate the head teacher's support with this.
I totally understand the pressures and how we're working. My concern is one child is living in an area but attending school in a different area, and what impact that has on emotional well-being when playing out with friends and all that stuff that isn't considered when we just look at numbers and boundaries and all that emotional well-being and that development, and then that person gets lost and doesn't have the same start as other children. I've struggled with that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Henderson. I think it's why it's really important that we maintain that local based planning as part of our arrangements. So, you know, it's quite in vogue in the DFE not to look at the individual numbers within Beverley, but just look within the whole town, because they would argue that you could live on Lincoln Way and you could go to school in Molescroft if you really needed to, because it's within a reasonable distance of 2 or 3 miles. And that, in my view, wouldn't be reasonable for that family living in that area, and therefore we still plan at school level whilst we're not required to, and we still make sure that we project based on preferences and all sorts of other bits of data that make that real for that community. And I think school governors feel that they have that accurate picture. I think the challenge is here is that you've got to balance the number of surplus places, your wiggle room, against the resource implications on a school. And so in some cases, you know, so if we look at Beverley St Mary's is one of those this year that stepped down from 60 to 45, but we started off on the first round of allocations a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, with perhaps 31 children allocated to that school. So a school that was crude to have 2 classes and would only be getting 31 children's worth of funding. That resource implication, the effect that has on the budget of the school over many, many years is significant. The school wouldn't, you know, be able to recover that easily, and therefore it was really important that when we make the decisions, we make them early enough. We can reverse them if we need to, but they fit the size of the problem. And I think in that curve here, there are a lot of places on that list that were taken out, but I would just draw members' attention to the fact that we've already dropped a little bit in our pupil numbers. We're at 45,000, we're getting to 31,000. We've already taken out 2,000 places. Academies have already taken out 2,000 places. We're proposing to take just short of another 2,000 out. It's not getting us down to anywhere near 31,000. And I'm not saying we should get to 31,000, but we need to be getting down to 36, 37 if we're to make sure the system still functions. And that's a real challenge. And it's just as a challenge in a town as it is in a small community school where, you know, that school is running perhaps with 21 pupils for 30 places. Now, the impact of that is basically the teacher's salary is not covered, and the implications that has. So yeah, it's a real wicked issue. And we're not alone in facing it, every authority is, but we are a statistical outlier in the numbers of places we've got. So whilst this looks like a lot more work this year and is an escalation, it's because of a real need we have to address.
Thank you, Tom. I believe there was a wiggle from Councillor Sutton.
It wasn't a wiggle, it was a question, really.
In that case, I'll take Councillor Barron.
Thank you very much. I was wondering, in Howden, they're going to build nearly 2,000 houses, and it's quite a big development. Have you been consulted on this, of what sort of houses and everything else already?
Thank you. Yes, we have been consulted. When we actually responded to the educational consultation, and I think that was about 3 years ago, Tom, we actually submitted a request for a new school for that development. And we've got a meeting, I think, on the 19th of November with heads and the local academy trust for that area to discuss this and what we need to do.
Oh, good. That's very good information. Let's hope they all produce children, the people moving in, which they often don't.
Certainly in terms of school funding, the more children, the better. Councillor Johnson, please.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much. My question was about the funding, which you've kind of already alluded to, and the gap in funding, and how are we going to make up that gap in funding if our numbers drop? Is there any indication from the current administration that they will look at the funding that we get?
So in terms of the core school per pupil funding, what we call the ORPU, which is a terrible acronym, but means average weighted pupil unit. So it's basically the amount per pupil funded you get. Many of our schools already, because of our move to the national funding formula, which we did ahead of when required, already are on what's called floor level funding there because of how poorly we are funded more broadly. Interestingly, when you look at the budgets and the economics, I suppose, of school finances, what you find is that it's not the smallest schools with the lowest level of pupils, lowest numbers of pupils that necessarily are in that most challenging budget position. It's those schools that are perhaps up to about single form entry of a school in size, so up to 200 pupils. The schools can be full to around 200 pupils, but not be receiving large amounts of pupil premium because there isn't a significant amount of deprivation, etc., etc. And actually, and expensive, you know, though rightly so, in terms of the staff progression and pay, expensive staff as well, and teachers on upper pay scale. So that's really challenging in terms of managing that. And I think part of the challenge we've got, Councillor Johnson, you're right to highlight it, is that as the pupil numbers shrink, perhaps we'll need, broadly in the future, less primary age teachers. And actually, it might be that therefore less teachers enter the profession, and retention is generally a good thing, but then therefore that becomes more expensive and we have more resource pressures. And if we have schools that are full or nearly full of a scale that still have those resource pressures, that tells me that the problem is on the amount of core funding in the first place. So what can we do as a local authority? Well, we can lobby for that, and we absolutely do, as you know. Councillor Aitken, we're here today. I'm sure she'd mention F40, so I'll get it in there for the purpose of the minutes. We can do that. There is some indications, and again, we'll find out in the budget from the DFE, that depending on how they may want to I suppose, explain this in terms of longer term budget setting, but that as the numbers of pupils fall, that what they may maintain is the total size of the allocation from Treasury as opposed to the per pupil. So if there are less pupils, there is an indication that perhaps the core funding would increase in line with that. Having said that, each time a pay rise is awarded, schools have to find X, 1 out of the 4%, for example, that is challenging. There isn't the money and the flex in the budgets for that. And the third thing we can do as a local authority, which is something that we are all over all the time, including this room at Schools Forum, is making sure that we are only taking out and top slicing for those services that really bring that value and that benefit to school. So, for example, schools de-delegate some funding, whether that's around the supply service or that's around behaviour support or those things, and having a real close managerial eye, I suppose, on what that can be. There's significant challenges in the funding block, and as the numbers of pupils falls, our allocation from government will fall, and we need to get used to that new reality as well.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Joanne and Leslie. So as my role as a ward councillor, at least once a year, I deal with like an inquiry about a child, the family that's moved midterm, can't get the child into the local school, very unhappy customer. I'm sure you've got lots of happy customers, right? But this is the one that I personally deal with. I'm sure other councillors have dealt with this. So my question is, then they're threatened to withhold the child from the school that you've allocated, right? And then this child's like not in any education for a while, So with all these things changing, with all the, like there's going to be less availability and things like that. So I was just wondering, like, how many dissatisfied service users do we have? Because I've looked at my records, and I've got quite a few that's just like, threatening this and not doing that, and okay, it's just really like how do we support and assist this client group, basically? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The school admissions team obviously are the team that deal with all applications for school places, and they work really closely with Joe and the school organisation planning team. Obviously, one plans the places, one's admitting the places, and they have a telephone helpline that parents can ring, professionals can ring, schools can ring, and they also have an email address, school admissions email address, where they do get a lot of email inquiries, and they feel that they can respond to those really quickly and timely because they can get all the information they need from a parent, really look into that inquiry and give the response back to. As far as I'm aware, we've got no outstanding complaints from parents, and I think the team deal with them really proactively. I think obviously in terms of National Offer Day for primary and secondary parents who are applying for a primary school place for next September, there's the online application form, and we've got a really high percentage. It's around 98% of parent carers who complete the application form online when their child's starting primary or secondary, and then those parents obviously are informed of that place. For those families wanting to move their child in year, like you've just described, so they do that in year process. At the moment, the application form is on our website, and a parent would need to download it, print it, complete it, and get it back into us. So we're just making some changes to our system that we use, so it will enable parents to fill in an online in-year application form, which we think will help speed up that process.
Thank you. It's just that with all the change of all the figures, and I just wondered how it would impact on that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think, certainly if I can just add in, thank you, Chair, very briefly. There will always be, and I say this as someone who spent a good chunk of time doing it, including sitting in rooms like this, literally having these conversations for 10 years, with parents and explaining to them it's a real challenge, because there is an expectation out there in the public that however much we counter, we don't always quite get that message through, that you have a preference for schools, you don't have a choice, and nationally politicians and the DfE don't always necessarily help that conversation, because we have to shape those expectations of the system, because the alternatives, as we've said, in terms of resource for schools, are considerable. I would say that the services that Leslie manages in terms of the advice and support for parents is absolutely gold star from other places that I've worked, in terms of how we support them, but that ultimately the outcome will always be the one that we get. But we've done plenty of things in the past 5-6 years that certainly I've been here to enhance that. So we've introduced waiting lists for places where they're the case. We've reviewed fair access to make sure that we're prioritising children and young people that need to attend a school. We absolutely maintain a robust appeals procedure so that independent people can make the decision if common sense has not been shown, and sometimes that is required in order to intervene and make the right decisions for certain families, and other strong arrangements around send and other things that I think we do get there 99% of the time. Our figures compare really well. You'll read every April nationally 85% of people got what they wanted, and we're like 98-99%, and we are that in urban areas as well as in rural areas, which I think is something to be really proud of. However, there is a correlation between the amount of surplus places we've got and the high percentage preference.
Thank you, Tom. And finally, we have a wiggle from Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you very much indeed. And it kind of I wrote the question down, but I thought it'd been answered, and you just jogged my memory really with regards to the admissions code. And I'm thinking about the impact. Obviously, we have these spare places at the moment. As we reduce these spare places, it's going to become more difficult. With that, the effect of the admissions code on non-local authority schools, is that impact going to become more difficult? First question is, are academies subject to that admissions code? If they are, then the problem shouldn't become more difficult. If they're not, then it's going to cause issues as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. We maintain, as I think Emma covered in the last piece, really good relationships with our academies, but not because we are influenced, but because we really robustly defend that local system, and to their credit, they take part that way. So each school that academises and the admissions authority transfers from the local authority to that other body, we advise and we support, and if necessary, and we have done in the past, written their admission arrangements for them to make sure that they still cohesively exist in the system. And where they try and change those things, we advise them where we think that is unwise or not in the interests of the community, and if necessary, intervene to make sure it doesn't. And there have been cases in the past in front of the schools adjudicator where we've strongly supported in that direction. I would say that is to the credit of the academy system that they maintain that, but they absolutely are bound by the code. To make the code workable, though, it requires a local authority that is prepared to challenge as well as support. And we are such an authority that is willing to do that. And to be, again, fair to those trusts, each of them don't have to maintain our systems. They don't have to take part in coordination of admission arrangements in year. They do. They choose to. They recognise they get a good service. They recognise that that's something that's in the interest of parents. But I think it's a really important question to make sure that we continue to perhaps scrutinise those trusts should they not do that.
Super. Thank you very much indeed, Tom. And also thank you to Al and Bon. Marie.
Sorry, I don't know if this will be useful, but I know in the projected schools bill next year that those rules are going to be further enforced, aren't they? Just in case any future situation.
Yeah, sorry, Mary, that's a really good point. Yes, so the talk in the Children's Wellbeing and Skills Bill about more of those things becoming a statutory responsibility of the authority. Again, I would say here it's probably less likely that will have an effect because we're already doing it, but it will be helpful in terms of involvement. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, no others. Thank you, Joanna and Leslie, for a commendably short PowerPoint. Always appreciated. It gives us time for more questions. And I do have a couple of potential recommendations, which I shall take the liberty of reading out to you. A, that the subcommittee note the strategic approach being taken towards school place planning, including the current and projected levels of surplus capacity. B, that the subcommittee endorses the work of the school organisation team in managing the process effectively. And C, that the subcommittee support the proposed determination of the admission arrangements for the 2027 to 2028 academic year. Are there any additions to those recommendations, committee? Just corroborating with my vice chairman, the Councillor Sarabel, and I can now announce, members, that they are permitted a short break where you're actually allowed to have a coffee And I'd like to see you back here at 12:55. Thank you. If we could start to take our seats, please. Right, we're about to go to live streaming. Okay, welcome back. And we're moving on to child protection conferencing. And we have with us Penny Dono, who is our Director of Children and Young People Support and Safeguarding Services. A nice snappy title. We have Emma Cunnington and yes, Holly's there as well, who is our Head of Service Participation, Innovation and Improvement. These titles just get more and more. Right, who's going to kick off? Penny?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just by way of introduction, obviously we have a number of children who are subject to child protection in East Riding. They are very vulnerable children. Colleagues this morning are going to take you through the report that you've been given and talk you through the headlines using a very, very short presentation before then providing opportunity for questions. So I believe I'm handing over to Emma.
We're just going to try and share the presentation, so just bear with us. Apologies, it appears that we're having some technical difficulties. Alison, are you able to share it, please? Thank you. I've just had an update on my laptop and I don't have the Zoom app on my laptop to be able to. It's not working.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your patience. As Penny introduced me, my name is Emma Cunnington, and I'm just going to talk you through a brief presentation that supports the report that we've provided. My role is to manage the Child Protection Conference Service here in the East Riding. Okay, I will do. Is that better? Perfect, thank you. Okay, no problem. I'll talk you through. So by way of introduction to our service, we have 5 full-time and 1 part-time child protection reviewing officers whose role it is to chair the conferences, ensure that everything is prepared, oversee that the work that's undertaken by the core group members is progressing the plans. So we also have 4 full-time and 1 part-time minute takers who are in the conferences making a record of the discussions that are taking place, and 2 administrators who are responsible for preparing the invites and making sure everybody knows where they need to be. In terms of the types of child protection conference, we receive requests from other authorities, so children who might be on a child protection plan in, say, Leeds, and the family move into our authority, Leeds would make that request. So we would hold a transferring conference. We have initial child protection conferences that have a statutory timescale of 15 working days. And then once a child is subject to a child protection plan, we hold review conferences, the first being within 3 months and then 6 months thereafter. So a big part of our work in recent months and the last year has been our return to face-to-face. So that started back in May 2024, and I'm pleased to say that now it's usual practice for conferences to be held in person, so that we're able to work alongside the family and have those really important discussions with them. There are times when that might be virtual, but that is led by the family. In terms of representation in our conferences, we have key agencies involved. We have police, education, health as our primary agencies, but then equally domestic abuse services, drug and alcohol, probation, family support workers. And equally we have family members that join the parents that are able to provide support and become part of the plan that's produced. So I did prepare a slide just with some data. So I'll give you the headlines from that. So we've seen in terms of our children subject to child protection plans, we've seen a steady increase since April 2022, with a peak this year in July. We had our all-time high of 349 children who were subject to a child protection plan. There's been work that's taken place since July, and we now have 298 children subject to child protection plans here in the East Riding. In terms of children who are subject to a child protection plan for a second time or a subsequent time, our data for this is lower than our statistical neighbours in Yorkshire and Humber, which we see as positive because it could indicate that our plans are effective and our interventions are having the desired effect and making sure that children are safeguarded. And in terms of when a child is placed on a child protection plan, the conference will make a decision based on the nature of the harm that the child's experienced as to what category of harm that plan should be held under. And throughout this year and currently, our highest category is emotional harm. In terms of our ICP timeliness, which is a statutory timescale and a measure that is used to monitor our progress, we have had some impact on our timeliness due to the increase in demand. Obviously, I've just referred to the fact that we've had an increase of children becoming subject to a child protection plan. So we've then had the subsequent reviews for those plans, whilst also a higher number of requests for children to come to an initial conference. We have been working to increase capacity, both in the service to enable us to be able to hold more conferences. So we've been given an additional 1.5 child protection reviewing officers and also further support for the administrators. This has helped us to improve our timeliness, and I'm pleased to say that in September we were at 95% and October we were 97%. So I'm pleased that that's above 90 where it needs to be. We've also, in order to support practice and work with the increase of requests that we're receiving, we've put in place a consultation process now. So for every conference that is requested, a consultation will take place between the team manager and one of our child protection reviewing officers to really look at has everything been tried? Is a conference the next step? That's been really well received across the service. We've also had some external evaluation that are referenced in the report in 6.5 and 6.6. The external evaluation highlighted strengths around multi-agency attendance at both strategy meetings and conferences, and areas for development were highlighted in terms of consistency of decision making and the planning. The consultation process was in response to that in order to address make some shared decisions. So despite the increase in demand, I'm pleased to say that we have been able to push forward to develop the service further and strengthen the work that's undertaken. So we've devised a guide for children and young people to support their understanding of the conference process, and also to there's a section that supports them to be able to prepare for attending and providing their views. We've also updated our guides that we have in place for parents, carers and agencies, with some frequently asked questions really to help them understand how the conference will be run and the expectations for them. We've also developed a feedback route. There's one for children and young people, parent carers and agencies that's through a QR code with a short survey, which is really useful to hear the recommendations for things that could be done differently, and also positive recognition of what's gone well. And in the report, I did refer to some direct feedback that we undertook during the summer, which is a small sample of parents that recently attended a conference. And we've been able to take some real positives away from that, and also some points that we've reflected on and had further discussions with our partner agencies in order to improve. We've updated our child protection conference policy, so there's now more in-depth guidance for professionals involved. We've also put in place a child protection resolution process with children's social care in order to support practice, timeliness and improvement. As I've mentioned already, following a pilot, we've put in place the consultation process. We've also reviewed our agenda for conferences to really look at if it could be held differently. We undertook some bespoke sessions with an external trainer to review the agenda and have agreed some points to refresh to really try to focus on the key issues for the conference being held, and support parents to engage in that process as much as possible. We are moving to the refreshed agenda this month, and in preparation for that, we've held 4 multi-agency briefings throughout October, and that's enabled us to update on the service developments, the refreshed agenda, so that agencies are aware of how conferences will look going forward, and also to reinforce good practice expectations for the benefits of our children and families. And I'm pleased to say we had a really positive response to that. We had at least 278 agency representatives attending those sessions. So in terms of next steps, obviously it's been a busy year, but we're going to continue to develop. As I mentioned, the refreshed conference agenda is coming out this month. We have a plan to update the partner agency reports for conference so that they're in line with the refreshed agenda. We're going to do that in partnership with key agencies. We're going to look to do an assurance review of the data held in regards to those agencies that are attending at both initial and review conferences, and whether they're attending in person or virtual, to look to increase in-person attendance as much as possible. And we will be developing a multi-agency assurance group specifically for child protection conferencing. So we'll be looking to hold regular in-person meetings where we'll look at some of that data on attendance, reports that are provided, and also some quality assurance work to ensure that the reports provided are of good quality consistently. Thank you.
Thank you. Holly?
No, I think at this stage, obviously we're happy to take any questions in terms of the report or the presentation that Emma's delivered.
Okay, thank you very much, Penny. We've got a question from Councillor Henderson.
Caught off guard again. Thank you for your presentation. My questions are on budgets and staffing. I've just done some maths. So you've got 5 full-time staff, 1 part-time staff and a manager. That seems a really, really small team in terms of 313 children on child protection plans. So I divided that up and it can't, I know there's other services and we're working stronger together, multi-agency working, but that equates to 56.9 children per member of staff. Is that staff working at capacity in your budgets, or is there gaps in the team for recruitment and things like that? Or is that where you work at in terms of numbers? Thank you.
In terms of current caseloads, you're right. There's obviously some variation amongst the team, but largely there are currently around kind of 60 children per reviewing officer. I guess in terms of their role, they will hold the initial conference, and then the next review will be 3 months and 6 months subsequent. So it is felt that that number of children is manageable for them currently. Obviously, the difficulty comes if numbers increase, but
Just a follow up to that, the number's quite high. I mean, staff sickness, annual leave, and all the challenges. And from my working environment, I'm aware of the mechanics and how difficult that can be to manage. And that just sounds concerning to me, that how the size of the team and the numbers we're dealing with.
I'll just come in on that if that's okay. So when we had 4 full-time equivalent reviewing officers, that's where we saw a lack of flexibility in the service to manage exactly what you've just described. So the dip in the ICPC timeliness related to one of our child protection reviewing officers that actually went off sick, which left us with 3 full-time equivalent, and we couldn't manage that with the demand increasing alongside a reduced capacity of staff, which is why we've had the increase of 1.5 full-time equivalent staff, and we feel that that is manageable, particularly with the other parts of the development work that we've progressed, where we're starting to see that those numbers on child protection plans are reducing. So we are hopeful that we've reached a peak that was in July, and we are starting to see some of the effects of the work that we've done in terms of reducing those numbers. But it's something we have got a key eye on, because obviously these are our children that are some of our most vulnerable in our community. So we are keeping a really close eye on numbers, and it goes through our SLT performance board and also right up to Merlin and our chief executive in terms of looking at that as a statutory function and protection of our children. So we're confident that we're managing currently. We couldn't on the previous numbers.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And then we'll move on to Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. It is worrying that so many children are subject to a CPP, but then it's really encouraging to hear that you are actually able to help these children and they're being picked up. You've mentioned in the report with regard to a revised family help model. And I wonder if you could explain a little bit more about this family help model and how that has increased the number of children that are being picked up, but in the future, you hope that that won't be the case because you will be able to work with them and the families sooner. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. You're absolutely right. Prevention for us is key to all of this. So none of us want children to be subject to child protection plans. It's an incredibly intrusion on family life, but it's also with the intention of working with families, and it's absolutely with partners as well. What we're really keen to do is avoid that, which is where we have developed and worked with colleagues in our family help services to strengthen that prevention and that early help offer. It aligns really, really well with the wider social care reform agenda, and making sure that we support families at the earliest opportunity to help avoid that higher tier intervention, which is what child protection is. So the strengthened offer that we have in our family help services very much around working, part of it working in our schools, working with our public health colleagues, being far more community based so that we can respond and understand need earlier. But then working hand in glove with the services that sit in my area in terms of those earlier opportunities to work with children where things are getting more concerning and they might require some social work support. But again, a lot of activity in that child in need space to hopefully avoid escalation. As Holly's described, this is really a whole system working together with its component parts to make sure that we do keep children at the lowest level of intervention.
Yeah, it's really reassuring. May I have another question later, unless...
Oh, of course you can, Councillor.
I wanted to mention domestic abuse and the fact that this isn't a category within our 4 categories that children are currently kind of badged into. Domestic abuse, of course, has been illegal since 2021, and yet we're not actually commenting on whether the children subject to protection order are the subject of domestic abuse or not. I think it's being badged as emotional abuse, and of course there is emotional abuse there, but domestic abuse is more than just emotional abuse. I wondered if you could comment on why we don't have this category. Thank you.
I'll take that one if that's okay. So our categories are national categories, so it's not something that we set as a local authority. It's DfE set categories, and that's what all local authorities will use. But you are right in terms of us wanting to be able to drill down in terms of the primary factors behind those categories. For domestic abuse, we do have a high level of domestic abuse within East Riding. We have, for the last 6 months, domestic abuse has been our highest category of need that comes through our front door, sitting at around 28% for the last 6 months in terms of those contacts to our front door. And we see that pattern following through into our child protection conferencing service as well in terms of reason for the significant harm. What we can't do is, at the minute from our system, is understand how many of those for each of the categories. Usually they are categorised under emotional harm or physical harm, depending on the type of harm that's occurred within the family home when it relates to directly to domestic abuse. We have got a scope in to improve our ASIA system in relation to that, and part of that scope is that we will be able to have a function that identifies whether the significant harm relates directly to domestic abuse. So that's part of the improvement work that we are hoping to achieve in the next round of ASIS project updates.
That's really good news. And does the family help model help identify the different categories of need for a child, especially domestic abuse that at the moment is categorised else elsewhere?
Yes, so when when a child is referred through our front door for both early help and safeguarding response, we have what we call primary factors. So we can certainly look at what those primary factors are at the point of contact, at the point of referral, and factors straight from assessment as well. So we can look at those numbers already, and they are DFE reportable. So they're standardised again across the country, across both early help and safeguarding assessments.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Shepherd.
First of all, thank you so much for your report, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for asking the question I was about to ask. That's really well done. But moving on from that, in terms of it, really, it's that early help, and we're all aware of how important those early years are. And when we get to the Child Protection Conference, something's gone wrong somewhere, and we're all aware of that. I suppose my question kind of developed from what I was going to ask was that feedback mechanism. You talked about surveys in terms of, you know, making sure that we're actually using what comes out of the child protection conferences to update our family support in early years. What is the process for that? How does that actually work, really?
So in terms, I can speak in terms of the Child Protection Conference Service, that we use the QR code, and the information that's gathered from the responses is reviewed on a quarterly basis. So then we'll look to see if there's anything that we need to be doing differently in response.
That's brilliant. I suppose my question is, it's the joined up response in terms of once we've gone through those conferences and gone that QR code, is that fed back into the work that's been done in early years, so we can actually deal with it, you know, because obviously early years, the Sure Start centres are returning under a new name and all that, but obviously the times have changed. We've gone through a lot of societal issues since then. It's ensuring that when we get to crisis point, the lessons learned go back to that intervention. And is there a process for that actually happening?
Okay, we're working really, really hard to use our data intelligently. So alongside feedback, we're also using performance and, you know, the information that we garner out of our system to help us shape services. So absolutely, that's what we're doing. Feedback is a really important element for us across the whole system. So understanding what, you know, a family's experience at every single point of that journey is part of a wider feedback loop that our colleagues in our participation service then utilise to bring together in a report that we regularly monitor, and then we feed that back into shaping services, and ensuring then that we've got the right level of staffing in the right spaces, because our intention and our hope would be that as we work in that more preventative manner and we start to create change earlier, my hope would be that we need less service at that higher end of intervention. We're not there yet, but that's absolutely the ambition. And I would hope then that we reinvest and we start to see that earlier opportunity. So feedback is absolutely critical. Understanding the experience so that we can improve the experience of our families is equally important, because our model of practice is very much about working with. So it isn't about us doing two. We are really committed to working with. We don't always get that right. So hearing from families, hearing from children, when we have got it right, but also when we've got it wrong, so that we can change practice, and that continuous improvement loop is really important. So I'm confident we've got the mechanisms that are joining that voice up more than it's ever done, and it's influencing and shaping systems more than it's ever done before.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Henderson.
Hi, again. I'm just interested in, so it's quite a high number of emotional abuse in terms of child protection and safeguarding. How do we capture that? So and maybe could you give an example of what emotional abuse is? Because I suppose in one family, a narrative and family systems, that will be very different to in another family. So I suppose my question is, how do we capture what emotional abuse is? Where are the thresholds at in that? How do you manage that? And yeah, just to educate us really on what that actually means. Thank you.
So in terms of the Child Protection Conference, there is a threshold of significant harm. So that sets out that there's either evidence of harm taking place, or that there's the situation the child is living in. There's potential for that harm to for the child to experience the harm. So in terms of emotional abuse, it could be just thinking off the top of my head, but in terms of an example, a parent who is kind of projecting anger onto the child, not kind of meeting their needs when they're upset. It could be a child who is witnessing domestic abuse at home, arguments between parents, you know, significant disagreements and disputes. So it's really on an individual basis. Each child's circumstances is reviewed in that conference. We look at the information that each agency has in relation to the concern and the child, and it's a collective multi-agency decision in terms of the category of harm.
I'll just come in to add that the reason from our analysis that our emotional harm figures are so high is the contribution of domestic abuse in those figures. So some local authorities will categorise under physical harm. We take the view in East Riding that we want to be more nuanced with that in terms of understanding what that looks like for individual families in the home. So we will categorise under emotional harm or physical harm, depending on what that looks like for the individual children that have experienced that in the home.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Penny?
Yeah, I was just going to add in terms of the area around analysis, you're absolutely right. Emotional abuse takes many, many forms, and it impacts differently on different children. And even within the same family, it can impact on children differently for a whole host of reasons. What I would say is, you know, there is a lot of professional judgment in terms of being able to elicit information and impact and understanding in terms of the outcomes for children. So we are reliant and I would always say, you know, child protection is not singularly about social care's judgment. It's a multi-agency decision. And as Emma said, it's about gathering that information, understanding and observing the child and the impact that parental behaviour is having on that child and that family's situation. And then using that professional judgment and that skill for which our social workers are trained to really understand and analyse a child's situation, and then formulating that within the Child Protection Conference if it escalates to that, so that all partners are looking at that through their agency lens in terms of understanding the circumstances for that child, and then determining whether or not that threshold has been met. Now, that is an evidence-based judgment. It is reliant on professional, thinking and values in there. And it can be hard because sometimes you can have very, very clear evidence. Physical harm is very easy to see. Emotional harm is much harder. So it's very reliant on, thinking through what's known and understanding the long-term consequence if that parental behaviour continues. And, we use research, we use a lot of evidence-based tools around that. But it's a category that's quite often difficult to identify, and we rely a lot on research and prediction. And also, of course, I come back to speaking with families, speaking with children, having the voice of the child. We use a lot of words and pictures with our children and our young people, because that can be a really good way to demonstrate to parents sometimes the impact of their behaviour, which they haven't seen as harmful sometimes. So there's a lot of evidence-based tools that our practitioners use within that whole assessment space. And I would argue that assessment here is key for us.
Thank you. I'm going to permit myself the luxury of a couple of questions. First off, I think we all recognise, and in fact it's highlighted in the report, that hybrid meetings are not the best way forward. I know we all had to do it after COVID and all that, but now we're getting back in the room and working together as a team. But I know that some of our partners are either unable to or don't want to. How can we encourage them to actually attend conferences in person?
So we've worked really hard with our partner agencies because some local authorities continued with a virtual model. And when partners are working across a number of local authorities in the same area, that can be tricky in terms of encouraging them to come into a face-to-face conference space. Like Emma said, our position is that all conferences are held face-to-face unless it's something that the family is specifically requesting and that it meets the family's needs in that way. We do have a number of partners that do sometimes still join virtually, and the stance we've taken is that we would want everybody to come in face-to-face, and more recently we've been using the feedback from children and families about their experience in conference to really feed back in terms of how that feels from a family's perspective. And we usually find that that is more impactful when it's coming from the family's perspective. So for example, in recent feedback, some families had said that the hybrid model was okay, but what they found uncomfortable is that some of the practitioners that were on attending virtually had their cameras off, and that they felt that was really disrespectful, to which we would also agree. That's now been fed back through our Safeguarding Partnership strategic delivery group back into those strategic partners, and also through those frontline briefings that Emma has already alluded to in terms of being able to push and change that that attendance and how those conferences are happening. But it is still our ambition that all professionals will be in the conference space, and it's work in progress, and that continues to be fed back through our governance arrangements through our Safeguarding Partnership.
Thank you, Holly. And just another quickie from me. As with reference to our front door, with increased numbers of cases, do we still have the capacity? Do we still have the numbers of staff who can deal with this? Are we in any danger of becoming overrun, as has happened before?
Thank you. Our front door arrangements are relatively small. They are a small but perfectly formed bunch. Our challenge in our front door is co-location of partners. So we want more partners in our front door because that gives us the opportunity to have live, joined up information and conversations as things happen. So that is absolutely always our ambition. In terms of our current status, we have a full team. The demand has gone up, that's no secret, but we monitor very carefully timeliness, and we've got a front door health check, which is a sector-led partner coming in to externally QA our arrangements to provide that assurance. We're confident at this stage that we have sufficient resource. My head of service for that area would very quickly tell me if we didn't have, because we monitor performance and our data very, very closely. That external QA really supports us in that, to make sure we're not marking our own homework, and that we have a strong line of sight in terms of making sure we've got A, sufficient resource, but B, that we're still making timely, appropriate decisions.
Thank you, Penny. So we can consider ourselves assured of that.
I will. I'm assured at this stage. I look forward to the outcomes of the front door health check, which I hope will triangulate that.
And perhaps you could feedback that to us. Right, Councillor Kristen White.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to go back to the emotional abuse, because like you said, if it's physical, it's quite black or white. It's either there or it's not. Whereas with the emotional, we're very much in the grey, and it's a judgment call. So I've also thought back to when we've talked about educational health and care plans, that at some point it might have been that as an authority, we were maybe issuing too many because we were being too lenient. So with that thought in my mind, I'm thinking, how do you assess your judgment calls on the emotional abuse? So what I'm trying to say is, you may over time become not more lenient, but I don't know quite what the word is, it's not sympathetic either, but it makes your level come down so that we're actually getting more children in that category. Because how are you assessing how well your judgment calls have been as to whether they were actually needed or not, or you intervened too soon? I hope I've tried to get across what I'm trying to ask you.
I understand what you're trying to ask. So there is a really clear threshold for child protection planning around significant harm, and the legislation goes into what that looks like, but it is still based on professional judgment, and people will interpret significant harm in different ways. So I might see a situation that I think is significant harm and somebody else may see that differently, and that's why the multi-agency nature of the child protection conferences is really, really important in terms of getting that professional judgment across the board in terms of children around the family, professionals around the family, sorry. We do a lot of quality assurance work, so that is done by both the service manager and other parts of our system in terms of looking at our quality of practice framework and looking at decisions made at different points of a child's journey, one being at ICPC and review conferences. We've also had external assurance because we, as Penny's already alluded to with the front door health check, we can be assured with our own quality of practice framework, but we want to test that out with somebody else looking and telling us to make sure that that's commensurate with what somebody from outside of our system would tell us as well. We did have some external assurance around child protection conferencing because we wanted to be assured around our threshold decisions because of the increase in the numbers coming through to conference. And we wanted to make sure that that wasn't because the threshold had been lowered comparable to other local authorities. What that told us was that we were around about where we should be, but there was some variability across our practice system. And as a result of that, that's why we've introduced that consultation between the child protection reviewing officers and the team managers. Prior to that being in place, it was a team manager decision only to come to conference, and then that conference would have to be held even if when reviewing, the child protection reviewing officer had some questions about why that was coming into conference, or have we tried this first, etc., etc. So that's really helping us in terms of stabilising those threshold decisions across our teams, and we're starting to see some positive impact from that in terms of the numbers coming down and slightly reducing, which would be in line with the external assurance activity that said some variability, but not hugely off in terms of where other local authorities are nationally.
Thank you. Just one more question from me. I'm having a bit of fun today because I don't often get the chance. With regard to the actual conference itself, and you're talking about working with the family, not doing things to the family and such like, is it possible that the language used by professionals can be a barrier to parent carers' understanding? Do we use plain English?
So our practitioners and our wider agency practitioners are trained in our model of practice Stronger Together, which really is around ensuring that our families, working with our families primarily, but also that the families understand our involvement and also what needs to happen to end our involvement as well. So we use what we call danger statements or worry statements, and also our safety goals, so that it's really clear in one sort of statement what it is that the professionals are worried about around the children, and also what we would need to see for us not to be worried anymore. We've just had some recent quality assurance activity that's looked at some of our assessment work where these would be stated, and also our plans as well. And they were one of the points of strength that they've highlighted is around how clear and simple language that those actually are. So we can be assured in terms of our families' understanding of our danger statements and safety goals. And as Emma's already alluded to, the refreshed agenda really works around the danger statements and safety goals, so that it pulls through from the assessment, the language that they're used to in assessment, and then into our conference space, so that we can be really clear on focusing around the plan of how are we going to get to what our safety goal sets out. So yes, the model is around plain language and helping families to understand. And what we really want is family-led plans as well, in terms of bringing in the network to support the child and family, because ultimately professionals want to be able to step away from that child and for that plan to be sustainable.
That's great, thank you. Well, we don't seem to have any further questions unless anybody's got a burning ambition. And so it just forced me to thank you very much indeed for your presentation. And we have a burning question from Councillor Henderson.
Sorry, Chair. Could I make a recommendation that the team come back and deliver a presentation following the health check? Would that be okay?
Would a briefing be helpful in terms of the findings? I don't, unless it can be scheduled in.
I think it'd be difficult to schedule something in, so maybe a briefing note and then we look at it again next year, so you've got all that data, yeah, okay.
Councillor Johnson.
I wondered if I could make a recommendation, not like me to not make a recommendation, just to recommend, commend the work that is being done, and that the strengthened family help model is enabling more cases to be picked up earlier. I think that's the point, isn't it? I don't know how to word that, but I think it's important, isn't it?
Would you like to use your microphone?
And ability to use the microphone. Commend the work to continue to make the best use of feedback, quality assurance and external review to improve both the work in child protection conferences and supporting agencies such as Family. And I think that for me, is that okay?
Yes, our most excellent senior committee manager has scribed that down. We also have a potential recommendation that we recommend that all partners at a child protection conference attend in person when possible. And that may just strengthen the above. I don't know. It might do some good. Any further recommendations? Speak now or forever. Actually, whenever you all go quiet, I know there's something up. So is that it? Okay, so that's the recommendations done. Thank you very much indeed for attending. It has been appreciated. And good luck with your future endeavours. And we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thank you. Before we move on to work programme, Councillor Henderson, I understand that you want to make an additional declaration.
It's a reflective declaration of interest. I'm part of the leadership team of a Ofsted registered preschool, and for some reason I completely forgot that at the beginning of the meeting. Sorry. I also the manager of a youth club as well, working with young people in Beverley.
That's absolutely fine, Councillor Henderson. We all forget things from time to time, particularly as we get older. Right, we'll move on to item 6, which is work programme. Alison?
There are no updates on the work programme.
And item 7 is forward plan of key decisions.
And there's no additional items on the forward plan of key decisions.
In which case, members of the committee, thank you very much indeed for your attendance. I hope our newest member enjoyed your time with us, Marie. And you've all been very committed, dedicated, asked pertinent questions. And as always, I thank you all for both your attendance and your diligence. So